Hello and welcome to the Transformational Speakers podcast. I'm your host, Erin Lomanjek, and today we have a really interesting guest. I'm super excited about her. Her name is Diane Halfman, and she was an undercover cop for the San Diego Police Department, where she experienced a unique perspective of life behind the scenes, just like we were doing behind the scenes of the Transformational Speakers podcast. She honed her fear and survival instincts and knows what it takes to find your grit, perseverance, and power to push through any challenge. Diane took her years of experience along with her master's in human resources management and certification as an ultimate game of life coach to pioneer the creation of her own company called SpaLife, which stands for Speak, Power, Always. As featured in her podcast, Live Your SpaLife, a call to action for all women to define and create the life they truly want. As the reality reset specialist, Diane Halfman travels the country speaking, consulting, conducting workshops, and seminars dedicated to helping women women and entrepreneurs move from a life of emergency to emergence. I love it. So thank you for being here.
It's so great to be here, Erin. Thanks for having me.
I just love that we met in like a little mastermind. And when you said that you're taking your experience as an undercover cop into, the coaching realm and helping women, live their full lives, I thought, oh my gosh, this is an amazing story. So tell us kind of how did you get here? Like, what was the thoughts that came up for you to really go, here's what I'm doing, but there's a call for something more?
Right. Well, when I first retired from the police department, I actually didn't share with people that much about it because I had a really public, kidnapping murder case as my last case. And I really wanted to kind of put a bow on that part of my life and really step into some more positivity and really helping people in a different way out of the capacity as a police officer. So unless people knew me personally, I didn't really share that I was a police officer, that I worked uniform patrol, that I worked undercover, gangs, narcotics, vice, all of that aspect, and wasn't sure how that was going to actually translate in. And so the more people would find out about it, they would like kind of lean in and go, oh, tell me about those undercover stories. What did you do when you did that? And what did it look like? And there were so many things that came up around it. And so when I've been asked so much to do it, that I'm actually now doing retreats for women in how to be their own cop and using the acronym of COP, the COP, to have more confidence, optimism, and power, because you need to be able to make quick decisions. You need to be able to notice the things you may not notice. And you also need to know how to protect yourself and your family whenever you need to be able to do that. So those skills are, very relevant today. And I was also kind of nudged that extra step with, the Me Too movement and in corporate and all the things that are coming up about women being able to be more fierce in the world, but also being feminine. And so I'm really leading a new movement about not me, about how you can not have that happen to you or to shift and change out of victim mode and be the person you're really here to be.
I love that. Not me. Not today.
Not us, sister.
And I think that goes back to, the funny things that I see with women, either entrepreneurs or in the corporate, is this, we just kind of walk around like we're very feminine as women. So we just kind of walk around like we're moms, we're wives, we're girlfriends. And then, but when you need to like walk out into the parking garage, right? You need to walk like a predator. You need to like own your space. You need for people to go, ooh, who is that? That's not the kind of person you want to attack, right? Like,
right, absolutely.
Own that piece of you and not feel like, oh, being a predator is a bad word, because it can be, right? But I'm talking about the instinctual, like walk like you own the earth that you're on, and just take up that space. I know that I'm knock on wood, not going to be one of those, because I know I carry myself in a very different way, but it's not something people teach us to do.
Right. And I love that you use the word predator, because that really triggers, and that became a media thing as well, where it was associated with that person lurking to hurt you and have that happen. And, one of my mentors that really shifted that for me, not only on the police department, but also, Bo Eason, who talks about speaking, and, we love him, and about owning the ground that you walk on, that you walk like a predator in terms of who you're being, because you own your space. And you can do that with just a grounding in your power, but also be feminine about it. And it's just a really beautiful thing to be able to be both and to know that you can walk in the world without fear.
Yeah. And I love fierce. Like that is a word I think most women would, love to be more fierce in their conversations, fierce in their relationships, fierce in the boardroom and the bedroom, right? Like just be more fierce.
Yeah.
And instead of this whole thing, like it's going to be, very masculine. And
Right.
I love that when we were talking about the different hats, the different hats we wear, and you can, when I'm on stage, I'm all dressed up in a dress and heels and all the jewelry and accessories, and I'm owning it, right? So there's that play, because when women see that, they go, "Ooh, I want to do that. How did you do that?"
Right.
And so there's this really cool thing that women are being more attracted to being more fierce in their life. And so
Yeah.
you help them do that. So tell us a little bit more about what you teach. I love your acronyms. You're like the acronym woman over here. I think that's
I
the
am. I
military
love that
thing,
so
the
much.
police thing.
Right. Well, I actually started really, exploring the word power. So when I speak on stages, I do a power talk. I actually have an acronym around power, the POWER. And so I really show women the different ways that they can do that. But I really started exploring power for myself and how do I convey those skills and the nuances and the things that we do. And so I started really looking at what are the 4 different types of power that women can embody and look at it from very different perspectives. So the first one is your physical power. It's so important to have self-defense skills, to know without having a weapon on your body, what you can do in a moment to protect yourself and your family if something comes up. Now, I know a lot of times, women can be like, oh, I don't want to be in that situation, and there's some fear. But what I found has happened is when you actually know the skills, I find you don't ever really need to do it because you are in the world in a way that no one's going to mess with you because you carry an energy that you know how to take care of yourself. So that physical part is the first thing.
I love that.
Yeah. So then the second thing is that you want to be able to look at your mental power, right? You want to be able to look at, what are the thoughts that are going in your head? What are you noticing? What are those minute details, not only physically in your space that you notice, who's leaving the room, who's there, what's going on, but to see, where is your mind taking you out of things? Is it really supporting you and really honing that mental power and noticing those little details make a really big difference. And then your emotional power, your feelings. There is a book coming out here soon. I think it's Dr. Barbara Rosenberg, I believe is her name. We talked about that there's like 90 seconds that we go through emotional cycles. And a lot of times women don't want to allow themselves have an emotional experience because they feel they'll get stuck in it. But knowing that 90 seconds lets it roll through you, you can actually use that emotional energy to stand more deeper in your power and to then know that how you can use fear to give you strength and also know how to dissipate fear. Because how many women you mentioned about being in a parking lot, you walk in a parking lot by yourself and you hear a noise. What happens for you as a woman? Do you go into fear mode and how the little nuances of how you're being may affect your safety? Or do you hear something and you're like, I got this. No matter what happens, you rule from that emotional power. And then finally, the spiritual power, the innate power, the listening to your intuition. And one of the things that I have found is that almost every crime that I was there reporting on, that I heard about, that I took cases on, where there was violence involved, almost every woman that I spoke to had some inkling before it happened that they didn't listen to, that maybe they shouldn't have gone somewhere by themselves and they maybe should have taken a friend somewhere, or just all these should haves, and not from a place of blaming or taking yourself out, but that really listening to that inner voice of where we could shift situations and honing that. And that's one of the things I do in my workshops is that how do you hone that so that you listen to that first and not worry so much about how it's landing with other people or how it will work to them, that we are responsible for our own safety first.
Yeah. And I think that whole thing about following your intuition, I mean, almost every single thing that I've ever been involved in, a car accident, there was a sense, there was something,
Yes.
right? And I've just always led with my intuition. I've never, shut that down. But I think a lot of women have shut it down a little bit and can't tell if it's their thoughts or their intuition, right? Is this just me playing out something? What? And so you're stuck in that moment, and then things happen, right? And so it's really, truly, if you know that you only have 90 seconds, I mean, I was just thinking about that. I was like, man, I can endure anything for 90 seconds, right? So even the worst feelings I
Right.
could go through in 90 seconds, I'm like, all right, just 90, 89 more right now, and
Yes.
really, that really makes it feel palatable that you can get through it quickly. And just to like give your own that we have that intuition, and guys have it, they call it gut instinct. It's all the same, but it's
Yeah.
just that knowingness. And whether
Right.
you don't have to go in there and figure out what it is at that moment. Just be like, okay, I'm aware. So now
Right.
what?
Yes.
At least stop the thought process and go, okay, all right, now I'm aware that there's something happening.
Right.
What am I
Right.
feeling? What's going on? What is this? And
Yeah.
then take action.
Right. Well, and it's so important to, I love how you talk about like not over analyzing it. And women can have in your gut too. In fact, it's good to know, where do you notice your intuition coming in? Like, where do you feel it in your body? Maybe it's actually, just a feeling, a sense. It could be something, in your head, your heart, or your gut. And just notice where it lands for you, because you can notice that you feel fear in your body somewhere else than you feel anger. Right. And so noticing where that is, and, instead of dismissing it and really even taking the time to analyze it, if you have something that comes up within you, your own internal radar system, however you want to call it, and it's just telling you something, really practice and step into listening to that. Because even just this summer, we actually had an interesting thing happen. So, Carrie and I were in Paris when they had won the World Cup over the summer, and they were all coming back to celebrate, and they were having a big parade, and there was a lot of people in the city and on the Champs-Élysées for a parade, and things were getting ready. And, we were kind of off to the side getting ready to listen to it. And we were taking selfies and pictures, and you could hear all these, fireworks and things that were going off. But our training heard us hear one sound, and we just heard this psst, and we knew that was tear gas. And we knew that we had seconds, and that there was going to be a stampede, and that things were going to happen. We didn't even speak a word to us. We knew that we had a certain amount of time to hold our breath and to get out of the area. I was wearing heels, and we just turned, and we even knew a direction, counter to the wind, where we just started in full on sprint, went down an alley, turned in a different direction of the air, and we were fine. And it's these kind of things that, you may not, a lot of times people think of my circumstances of just when I'm in the police department. I was on vacation, right? And these kind of things were happening. And so when you know what to listen for, what to do, how to maneuver, having these kind of conversations I used to have these conversations with my daughters when they were young about, this happens if we have a certain signal in our family, if we have a certain cue, if we have certain things that happen, even among girlfriends, this is not the time to discuss it. This is the time to move.
Right. And that happened to me this summer too. And it was hard because I had my son with me. I haven't really shared this publicly, but I was leaving the airport. We showed up on the wrong day, and I was so pissed at myself. We showed up on the wrong day. So we were going to go back and meet our girlfriends. And I was like, what's faster, the train or taking a taxi? Figuring that out. And I was like, all right, taxi. So my son and I, who's 10, started rolling our luggage. And a guy standing at the door says, oh, you're here for a taxi, ma'am? And I was like, yes. So he starts leading us. He takes my luggage and starts leading us. All of a sudden, we start go down a corridor. And we keep getting farther and farther away from the airport. And we're going down. And all of a sudden, I'm like, And at first I thought, okay, well, maybe their taxis are farther down or whatever, right? Like I didn't know, because I hadn't been outside getting a taxi. So I didn't actually know even where we were. We started walking. And then all of a sudden, when it hit me is when a guy was walking out of a doorway in a corridor, and he winked at the dude. And we turned, and I was like, uh-oh, now what? And in that moment, I'm like, okay, what do I started planning out, like, what do I need to do? Where are we going? I started taking notes of where we were, because I didn't even know by the time I was like, how do I get back to where we just were? Because I was just following him, not thinking anything about it, helping my son get the rest of the luggage, And so he gets us out to this black car, and it was a really nice Mercedes, whatever. And he was talking to the man in Italian, and I didn't understand. And he spoke English, but the driver really didn't. He puts our stuff in the back, and I'm like, I don't know how to get back where we were. And all of a sudden I'm thinking we're being taken. And I'm like, how do I also do this with a 10-year-old? How do I talk to him, tell him, like, I don't know, but I got to figure this out. And we got in the car, And I started noticing that he was driving where we were supposed to go, because I do have a photographic memory. So I remembered how we got there. But I was also sending a pin. I was trying to call people. I called a friend that was in Italy still. I called my husband, who was still sleeping because it was like 6 a.m. I was dropping pins every, like, I don't know, 5 minutes or something. And inside I was like so much anxiety in my body, but I was really like planning out, how are we going to jump out? And how am I going to do this? Or how am I going to have to take care of this guy and not let my 10-year-old see me take care of this guy, because we have to be safe. And I'll never forget, after he dropped us off and everything was fine, I just was like, and then I remember seeing, this is the other thing, I remember seeing signs while we were in Italy the whole time, says, don't take the black taxis. Well, it's an Uber, but they had banned them in Italy and in Europe. So it was like an underground Uber, but oh my gosh, the things that went on my head, the things you're willing to do in those moments. And I was really proud of myself after I got over the panic attack afterwards. Like, I just needed to get it out of my body because it was just shoving it down, like pretend like everything was fine. Was just like, oh my gosh, look what kind of tools I came up with. Look how resourceful I was. Yes. You know, like the things I was willing to do and the things that came up for me to problem solve this. So it can happen to the smartest people and the most aware people, and still just acknowledge that when it's coming up for you, to like, what can you do? What are you willing to do? You know? So
yeah. That is so important. And, you know, if you haven't done it yet, it would be great to have, you know, a conversation with your son where you have a family word that means something. That either means focus, you know, we're going to do something different, get ready for something, whatever that is. And I know a lot of people don't want to alarm their children, but to allow your children to listen to their own knowingness as well. And because sometimes kids actually key on to things before the adults do. And so when we train them to really listen to those things, you're empowering them, whether they're boys or girls, to have that happen. You know, one of the things when I was with the police department, I was working gang details, and they were having something called the Get Down series, where gang members were going into grocery stores with AKs and shooting up the ceiling to get everybody down, to then do a robbery. And so I actually had trained my daughters that if we're ever in the grocery store, they knew what aisle to go into that had the big boxes, to pull them out and go in behind them and hide, and don't come out until I got them personally. And for some people, they're like, you know, in fact, my parents thought, you know, I was crazy. It's like, why are you teaching your kids this? I go, you know what? I would rather them be safe and know what to happen. And then as they got older, you know, things like getting your own drink, don't drink from a punch bowl. I mean, there's just so many different things that are little nuances that maybe socially people feel like, oh, I don't want people to feel bad, or I don't want to, you know, this and that. And it's like, out of the over politeness, we're not taking care of ourselves. And there definitely is a way to be, you know, socially okay and be feminine, but have that fierce and know that you've got boundaries and that you are not going to, you know, be a victim of these things.
Yeah. And I think even just the victim of people talking bad about you, the victim of like allowing somebody to talk smack to you. Right. And not, you know, it's been recently, things have been coming up that I've been noticing was, my son had some problems at school, and everyone started talking in the community about it. And when they finally would ask me, I would tell them the truth. And it really, you know, wasn't such a big deal, but when I would do that, you would just watch, and she'd be like, well, you know, sometimes your son is a little different. And I was like, yes, he is. And guess what? The people that are non-compromising, the people that, you know, speak their truth are the ones that change the world. I am not changing my child from that. But most people would just be like, yeah, okay, you know, or just let her talk. No, the minute you allow someone to step over that boundary, that to give them permission to do that, you're opening a Pandora's box. You know, you don't know what the next conversation will be like. Well, you know, you're a crappy parent, you know, or whatever. But if you don't hold that boundary, I think that, you know, we're so worried about hurting everybody's feelings and that it's stopping us from actually, you know, being able to take a stand for ourselves, you know?
Right.
And I think that's also the thing about intuition, you know, worrying that, well, I'm feeling this way. If I say something or do something, could I offend someone? Right. We have to stop worrying about that, because it's not our responsibility on how someone receives what's happening for us, you know, what's ever being perceived. Because even if you said the nicest thing to them, they could think you were saying the meanest thing to them. It all depends on the way we view the world. So
Right.
stop worrying about hurting people's feelings all the time and really have some boundaries for yourself. Own who you are, and don't take it, like you said, don't let people attack you. It's the same way, right? It's that same
Right.
kind of feeling. So
Yeah.
what do you say for women that may be struggling with that, understanding their intuition? Like what, like if they just go, well, sometimes I get these feelings, but I don't really know what they are. Or how do I hone that? Because you're saying I teach them how to hone that.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at your intuition, like, because sometimes people look at intuition as either you have it or you don't. And the first step is just having awareness that everyone has it, right? And it's like a muscle, just like going to the gym. Like when you practice it and you pay attention to it, then it starts leading you in directions. So just notice when, just in life, as you're walking through, where do you have a sense? Like, do you kind of feel something? Do you have something in your stomach? Do you, like, every time you're fearful, you feel it in your heart? Like, where is it registering in your body? And then just take a moment. It can be seconds. In fact, other people may not even detect that you're doing it, but just take a moment and acknowledge it. It may be nothing. I mean, even your situation, you were fine, but it could have very well gone the other way. And so to listen to these type of things, maybe if you were in a similar situation, you would have been thinking like, okay, I know we're going this way. I know this is where all the people are. I'm in a foreign country going down a hallway where I don't know where with my son in particular. Maybe it's not the choice I want to make today. Maybe it is, but you're looking at all your options up front. And so you're listening to those things, because what happens with intuition, when we ignore it, it tends to not come up as quickly, because there's kind of like this muscle memory where it goes, well, she's not going to listen to me anyway. Why do I even bother? Go ahead. You learn the hard way and then, see what happens. So really listening to it, every time we listen to it, it's like a reward system where it'll come faster and you'll hear it more. And sometimes people will hear it. They'll sense it. They'll feel it. Notice what your pattern of how messages get received to you.
Yeah, because we do all perceive them differently.
Yes.
I know when I'm, and mine are a little different too. Like situationally, I feel like a wave of anxiety that goes through my body. Like I feel the chemical response.
Right.
If I'm with people, since I'm an empath and I feel people, if it's someone that's got icky feelings and stuff, I notice a tightness in my chest. And so I kind of always say, okay, I'm listening. And I know I need to get myself kind of away from that person. And so I've always kind of done this thing where I'm talking to like my inner child that gets really upset about being around that kind of energy from someone. So just do my little Wonder Woman hand on the hip. Even if it's just one, I notice it. I'm doing something about it and I'm moving away. But sometimes in the middle of it, you could be, someone's in the middle of a conversation, someone who walks up and you're like, oh, and you're like, okay, I need to get out of this. However, in the moment, it would be really rude for me to just walk out when this person's talking to me, So finding ways to just say, okay, I heard you, like to yourself. I hear you,
Right.
and I'm doing something, right?
Right. So, here's one of the things that you want to be able to look at is sometimes it's that because it may feel like, oh, interrupting them, or that'd be weird, or if I turned around and left, all of these kind of things. However, that might be appropriate, right? Because, and I know people don't like to hear it, but sometimes the most charismatic people are the serial killers. If you look at, how they would get women to really connect with them, and especially when the logical part of ourselves would be like, he's fine or she's fine or it all seems okay, and you could have that part. But if you have a part of you that there's something up, excuse yourself to go to the restroom. It can be very, just simple like that, and it may be everything is fine, but that's you listening to yourself and listening to what's happening so that you can make those better choices. And I also love when you talked about how you kind of have like this overall body, like kind of experience that's happening. This is why we want to actually think and be proactive before these situations happen, and notice within yourself, what are you willing to do, right? Because you have to have a decision where if something happens, are you someone that is going to run in? Are you going to run out? Are you going to be more quiet about it? Are you willing to make, a noise about it? Are you willing to put hands on somebody? Know who you are as a person, because if you've done, it's like any kind of visualization work. And I'm not saying visualize the worst case scenario. I'm saying visualize what you are willing to do, because if you've already tried it on with yourself in those situations, when you feel that, you can move more from reaction, that you don't have to go, oh, I think I'll do this. And then maybe I'll do this. And then running through it, then you're losing seconds.
Yeah, and you're coming from a response that you have the physical response in there. So now you're like, there's also other things at play. If you can think about, I'm definitely gonna have a conversation with my son, because that really made sense to me. I mean, he passed out in the cab. He was exhausted, and I'm like, okay, at least he's asleep. But if he's asleep, how am I gonna grab him and jump out? Like,
Holy.
What are we gonna do? We don't have luggage. Like, I was like going through all of that, but it's a lot harder to think when you have all those chemicals running through your body.
Absolutely.
Then if I go now, if I was to think about it, what would I have done? How could I have done that? And more of a logical response based on not the chemicals, but just, okay, here are the things, the pragmatic things I would have done. Right. And so I do like that. I like that I can give my son language that as a family, because we're all empathic. We all feel it. And so it might not even be something that's a physical danger to us. Mm-hmm. But to give them the opportunity to say, Mom, I don't feel safe in a way, like something's up, that makes them feel like they're in control. Because a lot of times as adults, we don't hear them and they're like, Mom, 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 trying to get our attention. And even if it's not to say that they're feeling stuff. And so giving them that word, that control a little bit to kind of say, I want to get out of here. So
and to give them a word. Right. Yeah. Well, and to give them a word too, because, sometimes as a parent, when you do hear this, Mom, 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 you may not be so tuned into what's happening. But if there's a family word that your child has, you're going to zone in onto like what's happening, because we can also in very subtle ways be training our children to not stand up for themselves, just sit there and be quiet, don't make a big fuss, don't, make a big deal about something. And, I actually had two things with my daughters. One with my oldest daughter when she was probably, 4 or 5 years old. And we were actually going to dinner with my extended family and friends, and we were crossing the street to a restaurant. And one of my parents' family friends, excuse me, had took my daughter by the hand to help her cross the street. And my daughter, in a reactionary word, just like flung her hand away from that person and says, "Nobody touches my body but me." And my mother looked at me like, "Are you kidding me? Like, really, this is what's happening right now?"
I love it.
And, of course, we don't necessarily want our children to be concerned about that. But this was a stranger to my daughter, right? And she had that reaction. And, so we have to be okay with those things where we're giving them permission to know what's good for them and know what's happening for them, and for them to be able to take care of themselves when you're not there. So even when my youngest daughter was in college, they would go down, because we're not that far from the border, and they would go down to Mexico to go dancing. And she would go down there with her friends. And I would always talk to their friends about, you guys all stay together, watch out for each other. It's like, don't go alone. And so all these different things. And, half the time I didn't even know they were going down there. I'd talk about, not informing, especially in college, right? You don't really know what your kids are doing when they're in college. You hope they got it all figured out by then. And I actually heard it as after the fact. They were all dancing, and two men had come into the club and grabbed my daughter and were taking her out of the club. Like she was in process of being kidnapped. And her friends were aware enough that they all grabbed one of her limbs and pulled her down and caused a big scene, that they let her go. And if they didn't have that awareness, if they didn't have that talk within their friends, if they didn't have this, what was going on, that could have been a very different situation. And so we have to empower our kids. I mean, this is even in college, right? And, I'm sure a little bit of drinking, you add all these different scenarios into the fray, and, someone has to be aware.
Yeah. And I think that's really powerful. And to teach them at a young age, if we're teaching women to be more empowered, we got to start young.
Yes.
And I love, like, if I was to grab your daughter's hand, she did that, I was like, wow, good job. Like, give respect. Like, I love that, because I think you're so worried about the reaction someone's going to give.
Right.
I went to go high five a little girl the other day, and she was just like, and I was like, oh, it's okay. We can air high five. We don't have, like, it's all good. Like, show me your boundaries. That's fine. I thought high five was better than a hug. So whatever that is, I respect that. And then I honor it for them, because I want them to know that they still have, like, it didn't affect me. It didn't hurt my feelings. Like, good for you for standing up for yourself, and to have your own words around that, and be able to do that for themselves.
Well, and what's interesting is, the same daughter with the crossing of the street is, when she was in elementary school, there was kind of a bully in the classroom where he was going around and he was lifting girls' skirts and snapping the bra strap and doing some inappropriate touching. And, who knows what the background was with him, but, he was doing this with girls. And, my daughter had said, like, not me, right? That's not happening. And so he did it anyway. And she actually choked him out and he was like out. Right. And so she's the one that got called down to the office and they wanted to suspend her and have these things happen. I got a phone call and I know that something happened, that my daughter wouldn't just do that for any reason. And so I had asked them and found out what happened. And I said, no, she is not going to be in trouble for taking care of herself. Not only get her back in the classroom and not, be on suspension. I said, but don't call me about something like this again. This is an internal thing for you guys to handle and in school, whether it's talking to their parents or him. But I look at, a lot of times when these little subtleties, and some people would say, oh, he's just playing, or it's just these things happen, but it's these little things that get let go in elementary school and high school. And then later as an adult, how inappropriate does he become on a first date, or does he, become, and we don't want to project what's going to happen with that. Yeah. However, they don't just start overnight. And it's like, I bet that he probably thought twice about how he approached women after that, how he did things and how he looked at those things. And so it all comes into play of setting those boundaries.
For sure. And it's funny because speaking of that, that's kind of what happened to my son. He was being bullied and he got jumped by 4 boys. And he threatened to bring my husband, who was military police, who's scarier than the police, by the way, to at 10. And they're like, ooh, he's going to bring a gun. And then somebody overheard that, went to the school. I got called in because they were suspending my son or expelling my son for saying that he was bringing a gun to school. We have no guns in our house. He just recently had a Nerf gun for the last 2 years. I didn't even let any play guns in our house or play knives or any of that. He doesn't watch any of those movies or play those kind of games. I'm like, he is the kid that raises money for nonprofits and charities and causes, and he loves everybody. And I was like, if my son acted like that, it's because he felt he had no one protecting him. And it goes back to that thing. What would you do if you had 4 people around you, right? And I did. I took a stand for him and I went into school. And I think this is really important because this is something that I really wanted to share is, I think in that moment, I walked into the school with him hand in hand and I was like, no matter what, I always have your back. And when we came out, he was crying because they were, not letting him go to school. And I was like, don't worry, Mommy's going to handle this. And we walked home and then I had to leave because I was mad. I had to go spend some alone time in the car and cry and get mad. But I think, showing our kids that we will also take a stand for them. Like you saying, this isn't on me. I totally stand behind her decision. Just like I said with my son, I stand behind his decision, even if it's hearsay, what he said and what he didn't say. I said, what would you do? I wanted to say this to the principal. You're like 5'4" and I'm 5'9". What would you do if I came in your face? You knew you couldn't defend yourself against me. So what would you do? And if we just, stopped, again, worrying about what people are going to say about the reaction, it's like, no, take a stand for your children. Show them that you have their back. Mm-hmm. Give them appropriate words to use. Give them appropriate. He did learn. Watch what you say. Really think about what you're saying because how it can be perceived, but also, I let him speak his mind. He doesn't have that, so it's like words matter. So now we're talking about words matter and we're using that in, okay, there's some words we shouldn't use, like, limiting words. Mm-hmm. We call them the BTCs, but, try, and can't. So it's like really taking the experience and going, okay, what can we learn from this? Here's some ways that maybe, we should change what you're saying in your language and really think about, before it comes out of your mouth, what's the intention behind it? And I think it's all a learning lesson. And I love that we can be that hero for our kids every once in a while that they just, and I remember my mom doing that for me. And it was one of the biggest moments in high school for me.
Definitely. Yeah. So good.
I love it. All right. So tell us how do people work with you? Tell us a little bit more about how women come to work with you, your workshops, those kinds of things.
Okay. So the first thing is I look at women and seeing, having awareness, really situational awareness of what's happening around you. When I first retired from the police department, I actually really focused on people's environment. And I have an academy, you can actually see that on my website at dianehalfman.com, called Clutter to Calm, because in there, it was because I had been in thousands of homes, I noticed I created something called the clutter to drama ratio. That the more clutter you had in your space, the more drama you had in your relationships, in your mindset. And clutter is not just physical clutter, it's what's happening in your space that's either anchoring you into the past and not letting you move forward, not being that clear channel to be able to listen to your intuition and have those things happen. So I've also created a free quiz. It's called the Life Reset Quiz, and it takes 4 minutes because you have that awareness of where are things happening in your mind, in your physical space, in your self-care. Because when we know where we are, then we can make those shifts and those changes, know where we're doing well, and what do we maybe need to change to be able to access those things, more clearly. And then I also have some workshops where people can really get those 4 levels of power we talked about, and having those skills to be able to do things, to think quicker and to run through the emotions and access that intuition and be able to do those kind of things. And of course, here on Facebook, and if you're interested in any of the live events, just put a comment in there and I'll circle around with you, and I'm happy to support your tribe.
Yeah. And so if people, organizers, I have a lot of organizers on my site too. So if these are people who haven't, want you to come speak, tell us what kind of things you talk about. I mean, you've kind of laced that out, but if you were to do your little power talk, what would the audience get out of that?
So so in my power talk, what I really look at is how are you being purposeful? Like, not letting life just happen to you, being very intentional where you're designing your life versus letting it happen, by default. In the O, I talk about, owning your life, really utilizing your calendar, which I believe is the most underutilized tool to be really intentional and using your values in that. The W is wisdom. We really go deep into what is, how are you accessing it, giving examples of how to do that, to hone that skill. E is the environment. That's when we look at the clutter component. That's where we see what are the things that we are not seeing that are invisible to us in our space that are actually taking our power away. And R is reset, because I believe that we can reset our power at any time. That's the name of my live event, is Reset Your Power Live, because no matter what has taken our power away, we can be on all extremes where we stand super firm in our power and we can just let our power go. How do we bring that back to center to really reset that and do our bigger work?
I love that. And I think it's so powerful. But it's really taking all the things around you, and almost like what you said at the beginning, like, where's your spiritual part? Where is your health part? Where is your, bringing all the parts of your lives together and saying, okay, where am I in balance here? What's going awry? And it's funny because I used to be an at-risk teen counselor. And one of the things that would always tell us if stuff was going on was how kids were kept. Did they pull their hair up? Did they tuck their shirt in? Did they not? All the things that they were supposed to do, right? The rules. When they would come up all disheveled, we knew stuff was going on up here, right? And so then it's having a conversation. So you're so right that when you look around your house, if it's chaos, it's because there's chaos going on up here. And even we could all say, oh, but I'm so busy. Yeah, you're busy because you're busy up here too. So
absolutely. It's a reflection.
Yeah. And so I think it's really important to look at all aspects of our lives and really, I know there's no such thing as balance, but it's to at least have more of an even keel on all sides. Because if one side is really lacking, it still shows up in the other areas. Right?
Well, that's why I like to talk about harmony instead of balance, because harmony means that, everything is in flow, because there's times, as entrepreneurs, we've got times where we have to just really focus on something and spend some extra time, and maybe it's taking a big portion, but then we really want to look at, how do we bring that back into harmony? Do we give ourselves, some days off? Do we maybe go on a vacation? Do we, maybe it's even 5 minutes of just taking some deep breathing? Like, what are the things that we do that bring us back into harmony? And, one of the things I think I learned from the working the undercover work is that everyone has this public life, the part that we let everybody see and what's out there. We have a private life with our family and things are going, but we also have an undercover life. It's the facade things that we don't really share with people, and the things that, is probably holding us back in a way that we maybe aren't even seeing that. And I'm really been focusing a lot on this, even just for myself, where there's times I've been really strong and really, standing in who I am and really know who I am and my message. And then I've also had times, even when I was on the police department, where I was in unhealthy relationships and I was giving away my power, and there are parts of me that I didn't want anybody to know. And I found that it's really important to share those parts of it, because, people could be watching this, either listening or looking at it, and go like, oh, they got it all figured out, right? It looks good on the outside, but we still have to learn from those lessons and take all those aspects that we're all of it. And we're just trying to go, what are the things that we're pulling out of both that allows us to, come together to, really deliver that message, being able to pull from both, because there's learning on both.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I really teach is taking, sometimes your message is your best message. Right. And I was listening to, I think it was Les Brown this morning. I always listen to motivational videos when I'm in the shower.
He's the best.
One of them was like, all the doors kept closing. And it became the part where he said, sometimes God makes it so your life feels like such hell. It's because you want to have such an extreme miracle to share. And I was like, oh, it's got to be extraordinary. Like sometimes in that breakdown moment, we're just like, why me? Why is this? And you're getting all in your head about it. And then I think about it, and I think about, I'm always thinking to myself is I'm going through this tough time so that I can reach back and share it with the people who will be going through this in the future, right? And so I might be going through it right now, and it might not be something I'm sharing at the moment, but it's something that after I get through it and I see the light at the end of the tunnel and I see what I learned from it, then I can turn around and say, hey, I know you're going through that, and I've been there too. It's the me too in a different way, right? I get you, me too. I've been there, done that. Right. And so know that even when it feels like, everything's a mess and you're at rock bottom, just know, first of all, know that it can only take you 90 seconds to get through those feelings, according to Diane. And then know that it's because the story is unfolding for you, and the story that you'll be able to share and help other people with. I don't think anything happens on accident. So I love that. That really put a whole bunch, like, wow, all synchronicity of the things I was listening to today. And then you just like preaching it here, and I love it. So my favorite question to ask is, I always think about my future self. My future self, I call her ELJ. And she runs a $40 million company. She's got all these things. She has a private jet. She's flying around, speaking and touring the world and doing all these amazing things. And when I get to a place where I need to ask for advice, I kind of pull her in and sit her across my desk from me, and I ask her, what should I be doing? So if your future self was to come back and give you a piece of advice, what do you think she would tell you?
She would tell me to really listen, for one, and know that support will come in unexpected ways. That I could plan all kinds of different ways of how I'm going to get somewhere or what's going to happen, and, to allow for the magical to actually unfold and happen. Now, there's also consistency, because one of the things that, with my podcast as well, and, speaking on stages and doing lives, there can be times where I'm just like, I don't know if I really feel like doing it today. I don't know if I can bring it today. I'm not sure if I'm really ready today, or whatever the things that may pop up. But to do it anyway, and to have that consistency to continue to be out there to serve, she would say it's worth it. Because sometimes I wonder, are people actually watching my podcast? Are they actually coming to my talks? Are they going to be coming to my workshops? It's like, what am I doing it all for, right? And she would tell me that, there's always that one person that needed the message. It will lead to the next thing, that really gets your message out in the world. And I think it gets pulled together with Les Brown, is all that messiness that happens to really be able to share that extraordinary miracle. I mean, our stories are powerful. And she would just say, keep going.
I love that. I really do. That's amazing. And so how can people find your podcast? Tell us about your podcast. Tell us where people can find you. All those things will be left in the show notes, but do it now so people can figure out where to find you.
Okay, thank you. So my podcast is Live Your SpaLife show, and the spa and SpaLife is Seek Power Always, that power within you. So I have powerful women on the show. Erin, you'll be a guest on there as well. So we'll get to play again. And really, it's those tips that people have about how do they stand in their power, part of their story? How do they get through the busyness and design their life? And it's really a fun, interactive podcast. So you guys can please subscribe to that. If you're not subscribed to this show here, as well as my show, this is how we build community. This is how you always wonder, like, how can I do my part in the world? Subscribe. Leave comments. If you're on Facebook, ask questions. If we didn't get to something and you're like, oh, I wish I could have asked them that, put in the comments those questions and tag both of us. This is how we build community. This is how we have that support system. So share this, get it out there, and that's how we grow.
I love it. So last little piece of advice, what would you give women today, right now? Actually it's kind of sunshiny out today. I was like, usually it's kind of gray here in Seattle, but what would be that one piece that you could really leave people with today to take on the weekend?
Thank you. Well, one of my favorite quotes is by Clement Watt, which is, take the first step, no more, no less, and the next step will be revealed. So many times, you may be having a great day, you may be having a not so great day, but all you need to know is you just take one step, and then the next step will be revealed. You'll be able to move in that direction and have that happen. Don't worry about steps 3, 4, 5, 6, because they're going to change based on that first step. So just take the first step.
I love that. You always say take a step and the universe will align. And yes. So that's really awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning into the Transformational Speakers podcast, and we will see you on stage.
Bye.